Hello, all. So, welcome to Chapter 4 lecture. We're going to look at ethical and sustainable sourcing. What this is looking at, are your sourcing practices friendly to the environment? Are they friendly to human rights? Are they um, socially fair and just? At the real high level, when you want to look at some really good examples of what are good ethical, sustainable sourcing practices, I would recommend Googling Masco, SBP, or Business Practices. Masco is a Detroit, Michigan-based company. They own some brands you may be familiar with: Delta Faucet Company, um, Watson Spas, Behr Paint, Liberty Hardware. Um, they're a home goods and consumer goods manufacturer, but they primarily source in Southeast Asia, and as a result, they've put into place a really robust set of supplier business practices that really help guide the ethical habits of their suppliers in these regions of low cost supply. As far as sustainability and green sourcing and making sure that your supply chain is sustainable, there is something called the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. Uh, you know, um, any company that wants to be at the forefront of green procurement and sustainability really does strive to be on this. You can Google that via Dow Jones's website and really and look at the top 10, look at the top 15 companies, and just take a look at some of the actions they're doing, and it really opens your eyes to um, what large corporations do to help sustain the world. Um, so when we start looking at ethical sourcing, um, there's a fantastic definition of it on page 114 of your text. But looking at it, the first thing that's going to come to mind for most people is fair trade. And fair trade, I'll get into that here in a little bit, but fair trade is kind of one of those first things. But when you look at ethical sourcing, um, there's two main schools of thought. There's a utilitarianism, which it's sourcing that creates the greatest good for the most people, and then there's the rights and duties. So some actions are right in themselves without regard for consequence. So looking at ethical sourcing, these are two ways that you can look at it. What I would challenge you to do is to read the definitions a little further, and if you go and you look at the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, think about those two philosophies as you're looking at these companies on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. Um, and circling back around to the Masco supplier business practice philosophy, and every company has these. They call them different things. I'm just significantly familiar with the Masco policy. I worked for them for almost 4 years, and this falls under a greater umbrella of corporate social responsibility. The EU has pretty strong CSR standards. The U.S. government has standards for corporate social responsibility. The U.S. actually then even rolls up how much of your spend is going to small, historically disadvantaged businesses, minority owned, female owned, veteran owned, businesses that are located in historically underutilized districts, such as extreme impoverished inner city areas or extreme rural areas that are impoverished. Um, and specifically to do business with the federal government, you really have to show that you have a good faith effort to utilize these historically underdeveloped areas and businesses. And the same thing with the EU. If you want to do business with any EU entities, any of the countries within the EU or the EU itself or NATO, you need to follow some of their corporate social responsibility issues. But just from my career experience working with my colleagues in Europe, there is not as much of an emphasis put on it in Europe as there is here. Um, so, what is the risk of unethical sourcing? You may think, hey, I just want to go out and I want to buy things as cheap as possible from the cheapest source and really create the most profit, the most value, deliver the most for my organization. But you do want to look at unethical sourcing from the newspaper test. I had a mentor early on in my career that said, hey, anything you do, stop and look at it and say, if this was on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow, how would I feel about that? What would my parents, what would my friends, what would my neighbors think if they read that on the front page of the newspaper? Now I know in today's world of social media, it's more, what if that was on Twitter tomorrow, or um, Instagram tomorrow, or Facebook tomorrow? Um, so some of the risk of unethical sourcing, you can run into liability if you're sourcing and you are knowing that your suppliers are breaking local laws or breaking international trade laws. Any case that's against your supplier could also be brought against you for knowingly enabling them. It can open you up to litigation. It can open you up to civil settlements. It can open you up to fines. It can open you up to severe social damage, damage to your brand. If you look at Nike had pretty substantial fallout in the early 2000s when the working conditions of their factories in China were discovered. Now, what's an interesting layer to that is Nike didn't own the factories. 90% of athletic shoes globally are made out of one company. They're headquartered in Taichung, Taiwan. I've driven past their building. They make 90% of the brand label, the Nikes, the Pumas, the Adidas, the Reeboks, the Under Armours, and they have factories throughout Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, China, etc. And even though Nike did not own these factories, Nike was purely contracting with a manufacturer. The public perception is Nike uses child labor to manufacture their shoes. Nike manufactures their shoes, their apparel, in substandard working environments. Nike manufactures using lower than livable wages. And while Nike isn't directly employing the people, Nike isn't directly paying the wages, Nike is enabling for these unethical activities to happen. So, in the public perception, Nike is doing this. So, as a result, Nike did a fantastic job. It's on their website if you want to look at it, of building a supplier ethics program. By doing this, by enacting it, by enabling it, Nike really has improved their brand equity. They've recovered nicely from that period. But there was a period of time where many individuals would not wear Nike shoes. What those same individuals did not realize was that Adidas, Reebok, Under Armour, everyone else was still buying their shoes from these same exact locations. Nike, being the biggest name, just happened to get caught up in it. So, when you're examining your how ethical your sourcing is, you need to know where and how your goods are made, who they're made by. When you look at the who, are they taken care of financially? Are they taken care of on a personal level? Are they treated in accordance with local law or better? If housing is provided on campus, which is not that uncommon in these low-cost regions, the workers will live on campus. Is it a livable environment? Is it clean? Is it dry? Is it heated? Is it safe, etc.? And then you want to look at, is the supplier paying a regional or a reasonable regional rate for their employees? Are they paying above, a national minimum wage? Are they paying a livable wage? Are they paying their employees in accordance with all labor laws? Are they paying them regularly? Um, do they have an open shop? Are the workers free to leave if they get a better offer? We want to make sure that the workers are not held in bondage. That it's in China it's very common. I mean, really, most Southeast Asian regions, the workers get 2 to 3 weeks off for Chinese New Year's, maybe a week off for Golden Week, and that's the time when they will leave the region that they work in and go to their home region. So for the most part, you come back at the end of Chinese New Year and you work straight through until the start of the next Chinese New Year. And most time, people will change jobs during this time. They don't often change jobs because it's hard to get off for an interview during the changes. And if you live on campus, you're kind of linked to that employer. Um, but you want to make sure that your employees are paying regularly. Because if they are not, then all of a sudden, if they pay you at the end of the year, it's not employment and bondage, but it is you start to enter into an area of the inability of the employee to leave. So you want to make sure that it is as close to the free market as possible as the local government, local economy allows. So you also want to consider when you're doing this that you are independently verifying this. It's not you send a form to your supplier and you trust everything they say. you can have a team yourself verify it, or you can hire someone else to verify it. Quite honestly, having someone that speaks the native language will do wonders in helping you verify this. When I worked at Masco, Masco actually would have they had offices throughout China with Masco employees that would do these audits, because that way, if I was going to do this audit, my my limit of Mandarin is, where's the bathroom? Hello, thank you, um, and take me to the big American hotel. I knew that that's all I knew. But to a colleague that is Chinese, that speaks Mandarin fluently, um, when their tour guide from the factory is not watching, they can go and speak to the people on the line. Hey, how are you treated? Are you happy? Are you paid? It's when you can get the people on the floor, they will tell you the whole truth. So that's why having that independent verification or a local language speaking associate can really help when you're validating your ethics of how your supplier operates. And you want to very diligently detail everything to do with your international sourcing to document your efforts, um, in ethical sourcing. So there is what's called ethical trading initiatives, and this is an alliance of organization that seeks to take responsibility for um, improving the, I guess, working conditions in emerging markets. This can be independent organizations such as the Fair Trade Association, or Fair Trade International, or the World Fair Trade Organization. It can be an industry organization where maybe all the Western shoe manufacturers or all the Western clothing manufacturers can work to better the conditions that their products are made in. I hearken on the fair trade a lot because fair trade is one of the most common. It's one of the most commonly known. It really resonates with a lot of people. Fair trade products, they're typically going to be coffee, cocoa, bananas, sugar, tea, cotton, and these are commodity items. These are items where, for the most part, coffee picked in one area is the same as in another area, is the same as in another area. And unless you can tie a story to drive value, there's going to be a market-based price. And that's why fair trade is important, because there's not much differentiation that can drive the price higher, and the fair trade protects the local worker from being exploited in these commoditized items. If you remember from the lectures from week one, I speak about category versus commodity. Shoes or clothing is a category because there's a big difference between an Aviva shoe that I buy at Walmart, a Fila shoe I buy at Kohl's, and a Nike shoe that I buy at Dick's. Just like clothing, there's a significant difference between a suit that I buy at Kohl's, a suit that I buy at Macy's, and a suit that I buy at Dolce and Gabbana. Um, so um, that wraps up ethical sourcing. So next video is going to be on sustainable sourcing.